Hello, Western Civ 2. So, Miss Green here. You guys asked me to record lectures. I am flu free, so you don't have to worry about getting a computer virus. Um, actually, this is tough for me. I've never actually recorded a Western Civ lecture, and so this is kind of different and fun. So, here we go. I'm going to record two this week because we have two lessons this week, and I will soon be posting assignments. And my plan is to post PowerPoints and also additional videos that will go with these. So, what we're going to talk about is the fall of the Ming Dynasty. Ming is spelled Ming. And you know what I just thought about? You may want me to write some things. So, we're going to go low tech while we're doing high tech and see how this goes. So, here we go. The Ming Dynasty. All right, so near the end of the Ming Dynasty in 1616, Manchurian forces from Northeast Asia defeated the Ming army and occupied several cities on China's northern border. A full-scale invasion followed, and China was defeated in 1644 with Emperor Shunzi, I believe is correct, Shunchi, with Emperor Shunzi establishing the Qing Dynasty, and that is Qing. Okay. Many of the new Hans are going to see themselves face discrimination. Han men were required to cut their hair in the Mongolian fashion. Basically, they were not allowed the long ponytails. Han intellectuals attempted to criticize the rulers through literature. Many were rounded up and beheaded, so they did not play about this. Han people were also relocated from the power centers of Beijing. So, let's talk about the emperor a little bit. This is Emperor Kangxi. Kangxi. He ruled for 61 years. He ruled from 1654 to 1722. This is the longest of any of the Chinese emperors. I mean, that's huge. He oversaw several cultural leaps, including the creation of a dictionary. It is considered the best standard of the Han language and the funding of surveys to create the most extensive maps of China up to that time. Kangxi also reduced taxes and stifle corruption and government excess. He enabled policies that were favorable to farmers and stopped land seizure. He trimmed his own staff and expenditures significantly to keep down government spending. Kangxi also squashed military threats and pushed back 3 Han rebellions and seized Taiwan. That's going to kind of be important later. Kangxi also stopped continuous invasion attempts of the Tsarist China and brokered the Treaty of Nerchinsk. It's Nercinsk in 1689, which brought a vast area of Siberia into Chinese control and allowed him to stifle rebellion in Mongolia. A quick note, I realize I'm talking very fast. I do feel like that gives you the option if you need to stop things. But this is going to actually be huge. I mean, he's over it for 61 years, and that creates a sense of stability. You know, it's something that gives the Chinese people a sense of security and a sense of stability, and so that is something that is very popular with them. All right, so potatoes and corn are going to be plants that are native to the Americas, were actually introduced as crops during Kangxi's reign. The food was considered plentiful during that time, and additionally, Kangxi saw an explosion in exports, particularly cotton, silk, tea, and ceramics. Emperor. Now, eventually, he is going to be replaced because, 60-something years is a long time to be in leadership, and we all eventually do die. So, Queen Long, Qianlong, is going to ascend to the throne in 1735, and he spends 60 years ruling China. He wasn't the dynamic ruler that Kangxi was before. Qinglong's later reign was characterized by his own disinterest in ruling. Qinglong was more preoccupied with artistic pursuits. He published over 42,000 poems and added to his poetry by hand to hundreds of pieces of historical artwork in the palace. So he wasn't considered very talented, but apparently he liked it. So there you go. He was obsessed with preserving Manchu culture and enacted dictionary and genealogy projects to that end. He also believed that sorcerers were targeting Manchurians and created a system of torture to combat that. So that's good. If you are trying to be a sorcerer in China at this time, you're probably going to be tortured. There you go. Good times. But he liked to write poetry. So, hey, he's cool. All right. Also, while creating this program in which thousands of Chinese books that had even the slightest disparagement of Manchuria were destroyed. So he did his own poems. He wasn't that talented of an artist. He killed everybody he thought might be a sorcerer, and he destroyed all the Manchurian artwork. So, and literature. So there we go. Yay. All right. Social mores became very conservative during King's reign, which worsened penalties for things like homosexuality. Any other things that were considered to be immoral. He increased demand for purity in women, which led to a massive refusal of men accepting widows as their brides. Previously, that was kind of a popular thing, but now they're like, yeah, if you're a widow, you can't be sexually pure, so they're not going to accept you. This also led to a significant growth of suicides in widows and the creation of homes for widows where their interaction with men was very limited since they were not acceptable women anymore. A little bit about arts under the Qing Dynasty. It was a very conservative shift at this time, and it reflected on the arts. It was a general turn against literature and stage plays, which were deemed subversive. Books were routinely banned, and theaters were often shut down. Despite the oppressive atmosphere, some creative work did gather the attention with the poetry of Yan Mi. I'll write them for you. Yan Mi is Yuanmei. And also, let's see, go as fast as I can. And then this guy, who I am assuming is pronounced Xiao Zun, his novel is called Dream of the Red Chamber. Paintings also began to thrive during this time. Former members of the Ming clan, one was named Zhu Da, and also Shi Tao. Both of these guys became monks to escape the governmental roles in the king rule and became painters instead. Zhu Dai embraced silence as he wandered across China, and his depiction of nature and landscape was embedded with the manic energy. You see a lot of influence there of Taoism that we talked about in Western Civ 1. Shi Tao is considered an artistic rule breaker with his impressionistic style brushstrokes and presentations that predated surrealism. So some of the things that we credit these other countries with were happening in China before that time. So let's talk about the Opium Wars. Opium, if you're not familiar with it, it's a drug that is used to alter your state of mind. Several of the key illegal drugs, let me stress that, come out of opium. The 19th century faced several military confrontations between China and the Western world. The Opium War of 1840 being the first. It was a 2-year conflict that pitted China against Great Britain. Opium was used medicinally in China for centuries, but by the 18th century, it was popular recreationally. Following the conquest of India, Britain cultivated and exported opium to China, flooding the country with the drug. An addiction crisis followed, and a ban was attempted, and smoking opium was outlawed. But British traders worked with black markets to bypass the law. Military confrontations became likely, and soon British forces shut down Chinese ports. Among many concessions during the negotiation, China was forced to give up Hong Kong to the British. So that was a big deal. Hong Kong was a huge port. It was a very valuable port. And so the Chinese used the opium to manipulate the British the British used the opium to manipulate the Chinese and get what they wanted. A second opium war raged from 1856 to 1860 against the British and the French, bringing more unequal agreement. Christian missionaries were allowed to flood the country, and Western businessmen were free to open factories there. Ports released to foreign powers, allowing them to operate within China according to their own laws. And opium addictions, well, let's just say they rose substantially. This leads to what is known as the Taiping Rebellion, and that is Taiping, the Taiping Rebellion. Yeah, internal political and military threats created further instability for the Qing dynasty. A famous group with this, and I believe this is the name of a restaurant in Ocean Springs called the White Lotus. The White Lotus sect was suppressed after an 8-year rebellion that lasted from 1796 to 1804. The 8 trigrams, tri as in 3, grams sect rose up between 1813, taking several cities and even entering the Forbidden City before being defeated. The most deadly was the Taiping Rebellion that lasted from 1850 to 1864, put into motion by the Chinese religious fanatics under the leadership of Hong, like Hong Kong, Hong, and his last name is Zuiquan, Hong Quinn. The city of Nanjing was occupied by rebels for a decade. 20 million Chinese died in the conflict. Now, so this is going to bring us into a new era. And this era is going to be under the Emperor Dowager. Emperor Dowager. All right. The influence of the Chinese Dowager Cixi expedited the end of imperial China. The widow of Emperor Zhangfeng, who ruled from 1851 to 1861, Cixi was the regent for her infant son, Tongzi, and she's going to be in that position from 1862 to 1874. And then for her 3-year-old nephew, Gangzhou, I'll write their names down, sorry. So Tong is Tong, Zhi, and then her nephew is Gangzhou. And Gangzhou is going to rule for 46 years, with Cixi considered the real power behind the throne. So she's kind of interesting because, first of all, she's a female and she's in control, pulling the strings behind the scenes. So in 1896, Gangzhou tried to take on the role of reformer in an attempt to modernize China, but his efforts were squashed by his aunt, Cixi, after several months. Gangzhou sought the support of the army general, who betrayed him and found himself under house arrest at Auntie's direction. It's kind of like when Dante messes with Titi. Don't play. Cixi also executed Gangzhou's fellow reformers. So who's pulling the strings here? You tell me. Not Dante. It's Titi. So let's talk about the Boxer Rebellion. Now, this part, you should go, oh, yeah, I've heard of that. So the Boxer Rebellion is going to ignite in 1899. Now, let's talk about why. In 1898, U.S. Secretary of State John Hay is going to put in place what's called the open door policy. Now, we've talked about this, and you talked about this in the U.S. This is when they opened all of China to trade with all of these other nations. Now, the Boxer Rebellion is when the Chinese are like, hey, we don't like all of these places being open. So what happens is this group in 1899, their actual name was the Harmonious Fist Secret Society. I've also heard the Harmonious Righteous Fist. This group seized the property of Chinese missionaries and attracted militant foreigners, and then moved into the cities, attacking and killing other foreigners, particularly Americans. Western countries sent troops, but the Empress Dowager sided with the Boxers, declaring war on the West. Western forces defeated the Imperial Army and the Boxers in 1901 and executed government members who had supported the Boxers and imposed sanctions that weakened the Qing Dynasty. After the Empress Dowager died in 1908, Zhang Tong, and I will post my PowerPoint, known as the last emperor, took the throne, but he would not reign very long. So the fall of the Qing Dynasty. The Qing Dynasty fell in 1911, overthrown by a revolution brewing since 1894, when Western-educated revolutionary, a guy by the name of Zhang Shan, Zhongshan, is going to form the Revived China Society in Hawaii, and then it moves to Hong Kong. In 1905, Sun Yat-sen united various revolutionary factions into one party with Japanese help, and he writes a manifesto, The Three Principles of the People. In 1911, the Nationalist Party of China held an uprising in Wuchang, held by the Qing soldiers. 15 provinces declared their independence from the empire. Within weeks, the Qing court agreed to the creation of the republic, with its top general, Yuan Shikai, as president. And so they have had a major revolution here. You see a big transition. So Tog abdicated the throne in 1912, with Sun creating a provisional constitution for the new country, which ushered in years of political unrest centered around Yan. 1917, there was a brief attempt to reinstate the Qing dynasty, with Zutog being restored for less than 2 weeks before a military coup that ultimately failed. And this was the end. I hope you're well. I really hope we get to come back to school after April 17th. Know that you're my heart. Know that I love you. And I hopefully will see you very soon. Bye.